It was the kind of event that made people nervous just getting dressed for it. Hartwell and Cross held their annual awards gala once a year. Black tie, top floor of the Meridian Grand, 600 guests who all believed they were the most important person in the room. My husband Damien had been angling for a promotion for 2 years. Senior VP, corner office, the whole thing. And tonight, he said, was finally his shot. He sat on the edge of the bed while I zipped up my dress. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to hear me out before you react." I turned around. His voice was calm, too calm, like he had rehearsed it. "There are people at this event who don't know I'm married," he said. "It's a long story, but tonight, would you consider coming as my sister? Just for the night." He said it like it was nothing. I stood there for a moment. "Your sister? Just for tonight? A few introductions, that's all. You want me to walk into your company's biggest event of the year and pretend I'm not your wife?" He exhaled. "The partners have this image of me. Single, focused, no distractions. I built that reputation over 2 years. If they find out I've been hiding a marriage..." "Hiding," I said. He flinched. "That's not what I meant." But it was exactly what he meant. Damien was 39 years old, polished, driven, the kind of man who color-coded his calendar and never missed a deadline. He had introduced me to his work friends exactly twice in 3 years of marriage. I had told myself it was because he kept his worlds separate. Now I understood it differently. I wasn't missing from his work life because he was private. I was missing because he had decided I didn't fit the picture. "You could say you're visiting from out of town," he continued. "We don't have to interact much, just a few hours." I looked at him. His tie was perfectly knotted. His shoes were shined. He had spent 40 minutes getting ready, and somewhere in those 40 minutes, he had decided that asking his wife to become his sister was a reasonable thing to do. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay? I'll do it." He smiled, relieved, grateful, already moving on. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. What Damien didn't know about me could fill a room. He knew I worked in communications. He knew I was good at my job. He knew I could hold a conversation at a dinner party without embarrassing him. What he didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had been brought on as an outside consultant for Hartwell and Cross's internal rebranding project. I had spent 8 weeks in their offices. I had met their partners. I had sat across from their board. I knew that building better than he did. I had kept it quiet because the project was under NDA. I hadn't told Damien because the timing never felt right. And honestly, because something in me had already started to notice the distance between us. The unanswered questions, the business trips that ran long, the way he looked at his phone when he thought I wasn't watching. I hadn't had proof of anything yet, but I had instincts, and tonight I decided I was going to trust them. The gala was everything the invitation promised. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet in the corner, waiters moving through the crowd like they were part of the decor. Damien walked in with his shoulders back and his smile already on. He put his hand on the small of my back, a reflex, quickly corrected, and then stepped slightly ahead of me. Not beside me. Ahead. Like he was already separating us before the first conversation started. The first introduction happened near the bar. 2 senior partners, both in their 50s, both holding whiskey. "Gentlemen," Damien said, "this is my sister Cassidy. She's in from Atlanta for the week." He said it without hesitation, without a flicker. I shook their hands and smiled. "Great to meet you both," I said. One of them, tall, silver-haired with a firm handshake, looked at me for just a moment longer than expected. His name tag said Bill Ashworth, managing partner. I already knew who Bill Ashworth was. Bill Ashworth had personally approved my consulting contract. We had met 4 times, had lunch once. He had called my final presentation the clearest strategic thinking this firm has seen from an outside voice in a decade. I watched his face as Damien introduced me as his sister from Atlanta. Bill looked at me. I looked back, steady, neutral, giving nothing away. He smiled politely and turned back to Damien. He hadn't placed me yet, but he would. The night moved the way these events do. Slowly at first, then all at once. Damien worked the room. He laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny. He touched elbows and leaned in close and performed the version of himself he had been rehearsing for months. I stayed nearby, close enough to be his sister, far enough to observe. And what I observed was this. Damien was not working toward his promotion. He was working toward a person. Her name was Nora Calloway, Executive Director of Operations. 44 years old. Sharp in a way that made you want to pay attention. She moved through the room like someone who had already decided the outcome of every conversation before it started. Damien found her within 20 minutes of arriving. The way they greeted each other. A touch that lasted a half-second too long, a look that carried a whole conversation inside it, told me everything I had been afraid to know. This was not new. This had been going on for a while. I excused myself to get a drink and stood near the edge of the room. I watched them. They didn't touch again. They were careful, professional on the surface. But I had spent 8 weeks learning how people in that building communicated, what they said out loud, and what they said with everything else. Damien and Nora Calloway were not colleagues. They were something that had been building in the dark while I stayed home and told myself the distance between us was just stress. I set down my glass. I did not cry. I did not feel the floor drop out from under me. I felt something quieter than that, and colder. The kind of clarity that arrives when you stop hoping you're wrong. I had dressed up, taken off my wedding ring, agreed to be his sister. And the reason he needed me to disappear wasn't his reputation. It was her. 20 minutes later, Bill Ashworth found me by the windows. "I apologize," he said, lowering his voice. "I should have said something sooner. You're Cassidy Walsh. You led the rebranding project for us last quarter." "I am," I said. He glanced across the room toward Damien. "You two have the same last name." "We do," I said. A pause. "I see," Bill said carefully. He was a smart man. He didn't need me to explain. We talked for 20 minutes about the rebranding work, about the strategy I had built, about where the firm was headed. He introduced me to 2 other partners, Caroline Webb and Dawn Frazier, and I watched their faces shift as they recognized my name. Not Damien's sister. Not a guest from Atlanta. Someone who had already done serious work for their firm. Someone they had already decided they respected. Across the room, Damien noticed. I could see it in the way he paused mid-conversation, the way his eyes tracked over to where I was standing, with 3 of the firm's most senior partners. He couldn't hear what we were saying, but he could see that I was not standing quietly near the bar waiting for the night to end. I saw him take a small step toward us, then stop. He didn't know what he was walking into. Bill Ashworth said it casually, almost as an aside. "We've actually been discussing bringing Cassidy on in a more permanent capacity." The board was impressed with the Q3 work. Caroline Webb nodded. "The communication strategy alone saved us 3 months of internal back and forth." Dawn Frazier said, "We should set up a proper meeting. I'd love to hear your thinking on the expansion side." I smiled and said I would be glad to. 3 feet away, a waiter passed with a tray of champagne. I did not take a glass. I didn't need one. It was Caroline Webb who brought it back to Damien. "Your colleague Walsh has been doing incredible work for us," she said, appearing beside him near the dessert table. "Walsh?" he said. "Cassidy Walsh. She led our rebranding project last fall. Just had a wonderful conversation with her. Bill's talking about bringing her on full-time." She gestured across the room. Toward me. I watched Damien's face in the moment he understood. It was like watching a building lose power. Floor by floor, light by light, until the whole thing went dark. He crossed the room in 30 seconds. "What are you doing?" he said. His voice was low, controlled, but his jaw was tight. "Talking to your partners," I said. "You told them your name." "It's my name, Damien. They think you're my sister." "Some of them did," I said, until they remembered working with me for 8 weeks last fall. I paused. I should have mentioned that project sooner. The timing never felt right. He stared at me. "You knew," he said. "Yes," I said. "I knew." "Cassidy. Don't." My voice was still quiet, still even. "You brought me here tonight and asked me to disappear, to have no name, no history, no connection to you." He said nothing. "I want you to think about why you needed that," I said. "Not for a promotion, not for your reputation, because of Nora Calloway." The blood drained from his face. "I'm not going to make a scene," I continued. "That's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because you should know that I know, and because this conversation is not over. It's just not happening here. I left him standing there and went back to Bill Ashworth. We finished our conversation. He handed me his card. I shook hands with Caroline and Don and 2 other people whose names I already knew from the org chart I had memorized 3 months ago. I stayed another 40 minutes. I was gracious. I was warm. I was exactly who I actually was. Damien did not get near Nora Calloway again that night. He stayed near the edge of the room and watched me work the crowd he had tried to hide me from. We drove home in silence. He gripped the steering wheel the whole way. Didn't turn on music. Didn't speak until we pulled into the driveway. "How long have you known," he asked, "about the consulting project, since I took it?" "About Nora." I looked at him. "I confirmed it tonight, but I think I've known longer than that." We let out a breath. "I'm sorry," he said. And for the first time all night, he sounded like a real person instead of a performance. "I know," I said, "but sorry isn't enough. Not for this." I went inside and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Not crying, not angry, exactly, just sitting with the truth of it, the whole shape of the lie, how long it had been growing, how carefully it had been maintained. He had built a version of his life where I existed only at home, where I had no name in the rooms that mattered to him. And tonight he had asked me to confirm that erasure myself, to put on a different name, to smile and nod and take up no space. I had done it, and then I had refused to. 3 weeks later, I signed the agreement with Hartwell and Cross, Director of Strategic Communications. It was the role Bill Ashworth said the firm had needed for years. Damien and I are no longer together. That conversation happened the morning after the gala, quietly, without a scene, the way I had promised. He apologized more than once, said he hadn't thought it would go that far. But the truth is, it had already gone exactly as far as it needed to. He brought me into that room to be invisible, and I walked out of it more seen than I had ever been.